This is Back to Back.
Yo, what's up, back-to-backers? This is Willy Joy, and welcome to the show. This is Back to Back. This is my podcast. You're listening to it. I can't tell if I sound a little crazy this time around. I'm a little low on sleep. I'm not going to lie to you. Feeling a little loopy, but I'm excited about today's show. My guest on the show today is Sander Van Doorn, and it's always just awesome when you can talk to somebody who's been doing it as long as he has, over 2 decades in the game. And right now, Sander Van Doorn is celebrating the 15-year anniversary of his Identity radio show. And as somebody who's been doing a radio show on Sirius XM for just a couple years, the idea of keeping that going for 15 years or more is just staggering to me. So I give him huge props for that. And he's also launched his Purple Haze project. And there he's kind of exploring darker, deeper sounds, and he's really reinventing the live experience for that project too. There's a ton of really involved visuals, and he's being pretty selective about where he puts those shows up. So make sure to keep up with Sander Van Doorn, Purple Haze. He's always touring around the world, always dropping tons of new music as well. He's got his record label, Doorn Records. It's a lot. He's a busy guy. I'm going to put a link in the description of this episode where you can go keep up with all of that, and you're going to hear him talk more about it in just a minute. I want to tell you about our sponsor today, Serato. I've used Serato's DJ software for probably over 10 years now. They've always been an amazing company, amazing products, and now they've moved on to not just doing things for DJs, but producers as well. They just released the brand new Serato Studio. For all you beat makers out there, Serato's really figured out a great way to simplify and streamline the production process. And if there are any producers out there who are thinking, well, I've already got a DAW, I've already got programs I'm comfortable in, think of Serato Studio as another tool that you can put into your belt. It's a really great way to get an idea going quickly. There's tons of features no matter your skill level. It comes built in with tons of custom samples, loops, effects. They have some celebrity producers making sample packs for them. There's a Just Blaze sample pack that they released on the launch that's crazy. And you can easily export stems out of Serato Studio into whatever your main program is. So right now, go to www.serato.com/studio and download it. There's a free 14-day trial, so you got nothing to lose. Go check it out. Start making some new sounds. Start having some fun. That's what it's all about. www.serato.com/studio. And I did that whole ad read without looking at my notes once. Because we are clearly off the rails today. If you want to let me know just how far I've fallen, you can always hit me up. backtobackpod@gmail.com is the email address. Or you can just make fun of me publicly at Willy Joy or at backtobackpod on all social media. But, and hear me out here, if you want to go for the full public shaming experience, you got to join so many people out there, so many listeners of this show who have already helped spread the word of this particular brand of insanity that I've got going on over here at Back to Back. Anytime I see somebody posting up that they're listening to the show, tagging me in their stories, I'm always going to be responding, reposting all of your guys' content. It's great to talk shop with everybody out there, see what's going on in your guys' lives. I might even send some inappropriately flirty emojis from time to time. You really never know what you're going to get. But in all seriousness, I really do appreciate everybody out there spreading the word about this show. It helps more than a little bit. And if you want the bonus points, don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, all the same shit you hear every podcaster saying. We say it because it's true. So that's my speech. I love you. Rant over. All right. So For today's episode with Sander Van Doorn, I met up with him at his hotel room out here in DC. You know, generally my experience with people who have been doing it as long as he has, and people who have had that much success and are continuing to kill it even today, either they're awesome or they are terrible. He was very much the former. Couldn't have been a sweeter guy. We actually ended up hanging out kind of all night long after we stopped recording, had a couple drinks, chatted it up. It was one of those nice ones where I felt like, yeah, I actually kind of made a new friend there. And I think you can hear that in the conversation. You know, we started off talking about what it's like to grow up in the Netherlands, kind of the unique music scene and the climate there. And he's had so many accomplishments over the years, it was really hard to know kind of where to even take it. So I did my best. I think we covered a lot of ground. And more than anything else, I think what I took away from this is really just that Sander is the model of a true veteran professional, you know, always on his own path, never too swayed by the trends, and always looking for new challenges. So this one was cool, and I think you guys are going to love it too. Let's get into it right now. This is me and Sander Van Doorn, back to back. Let's go. Chicago, I was like 10 years for me, and then I was in San Diego for the last 6 years.
Yeah, well, that's my favorite spot.
Oh, man.
Yeah. There was a certain point where I was actually thinking about moving to the US myself. And I was kind of thinking about either LA because, you know, everybody's basically there, you know,
right.
the songwriters and, all the colleague DJs who were living in the US from abroad. But I found, you know, San Diego to be a little more chill out, relax. And but in the end, I stayed in Amsterdam. Long story short.
I mean, it's interesting. I was thinking about this on the way over, that it's really the Dutch and the Swedes who have like established for dance music, who have like really established sort of their own thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
That can exist separate. It's like most, especially in the modern EDM era, right?
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of what's happening is somewhat reliant on what's happening in the US.
Absolutely.
But for you guys, and I think for the Swedes, maybe a few others, you've got your own thing, right?
Yeah. It kind of started out in the 80s when there was this radio DJ, a very famous radio DJ called Ben Liebrand. And he was the first one doing like half an hour mixes. He would do one every single week. So he would actually mix records into each other, and that was a completely new phenomenon because it used to be only like start-stop, you know,
right.
You would talk over, 2 tracks, and that was it. And all of a sudden, you had this mix, and one track, led to the other, and that was pretty special actually. And a lot of people dove into that whole scene, and it actually became pretty big in the gay scene over in Amsterdam.
Sure.
Where clubs like It and Roxy started to pop up, and it kind of blew up. And because of Amsterdam, it kind of spread out throughout the rest of the country. Also in my city, Eindhoven, where you had this club called the Dance Salon in Dutch. It's called, well, basically, you literally translate it as the dance saloon, which sounds really crappy, but actually it was a really, really good club and really good music, and that's how I came to notice this whole dance phenomenon.
What was the name of the DJ you said first started mixing the records together?
Ben Liebrand.
Ben, okay.
Yeah.
And what age were you when he was sort of doing his thing?
I was really young, actually. I was around 6 or 7 years old. And my brother was, older brother, 10 years older. He was already listening to the mixes. So whenever he was listening to the mix, I wanted to listen to it myself. And
what kind of music was it that was being mixed at that time?
It was kind of a very early house. It was called also like New Beat, the early Acid, and but also mixed into tracks from like Depeche Mode, like Enjoy the Silence. Those tracks were already a little bit dance related.
Sure.
And he bought them all on vinyl, and he was my big example. So whatever he wanted to listen to, I listened to myself. And until he bought this Kiss record, I Was Made for Loving You. I was like, what the hell is this? I wasn't feeling that at all. So that's what I noticed. I really like the whole dance, beat, combination.
Right. And yeah, it's funny with family too, where, whether it's a father figure or a brother or anything like that, you follow them for a while. It's like you just want to be exactly like them. And then just like when you heard the Kiss thing, I mean, I've had moments like that too, where you're like, oh, wait, no, we're not.
No, this is not going to happen.
No, we're not the same.
This is not my music, no.
That's so funny, man.
Yeah, but he also bought like records from, for instance, like it's called Made in Orleans, Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, which was a really, really dark track. Quite a big hit, but a really strange track actually, with kind of like a triplet kind of beat.
Right.
And I was really, obsessed with that track at a very early stage. So that was very dark music I was listening to when I was 5 or 6 years old. Everybody my age was listening to like child music, music you have today like Baby Shark. Not me. I was listening to Orchestral Maneuvers to the Dark. Yeah.
I mean, outside of your brother, is there anything you can point to? Like, did you have other interests that were sort of different in that way?
Well, it wasn't just my brother, because my father was really fond with the whole new synthesizer phenomena. For instance, like Vangelis and also Jean-Michel Jarre. And he bought the vinyl of the whole Equinox album. And whenever he put on the album, he would tell a story to me. And it was called, this guy, David, it was called. And he was walking on a track and he had like sad music. It was pretty harsh story, actually, because he would say, he just got run over by a train. So you hear the music like getting really, really sad. And I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
And then he had like positive notes. So it kind of, came back to, a whole different kind of melody. I think that's why I kind of went deeper into music than I would say an average person would do.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I think kids are so much smarter than we give them credit for,
They're basically a sponge.
That's exactly right. And it's interesting to think about, if you expose a kid to sort of whatever sophisticated music or higher concept art at a young age. I mean, it sounds like you were able to just sort of absorb it and, for what you ended up doing, get a head start a little, right?
The same as the young kids, learning how to play the violin or like play the piano at such an early age. I mean, it's quite amazing to see, how quickly a kid learns. I have a 5-month-old kid myself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she's learning very quickly. So it's quite amazing to see, actually.
And I mean, to bring it back to what we do too, I mean, the level of skill some of these young producers have now.
Oh, absolutely.
At, age 14, 15, 16.
It's crazy. It's a whole different way as well of these days, the young kids watching tutorials, hooking up themselves on social media with each other, to exchanging ideas. It's completely different to what we're used to.
Right.
We had to find everything out ourselves, and it took a lot of time, just to get into the whole synthesizer, phenomena.
Well, of course.
And these days, it's pretty remarkable to see how quickly the young kids learn, and they come up with really, really good tracks as well. And it's quite impressive.
Yeah, I mean, everything's just evolving so fast now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How did you learn how to make music at the start? I mean, I have to assume a lot of what you were doing was all analog equipment.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I started out with a small Casio keyboard, and I learned myself how to copy existing melodies. So, just for myself, how does a melody, where does it come from? How's a melody built? So the best way to learn is to replay existing melodies. For instance, like Insomniac from Fateless.
Oh yeah,
was like one of those
Classic,
melodies. Yeah. You learned, and then the next step was make your own melody. And my brother, he came with this synthesizer combination with a drum computer as well. He kind of borrowed from a friend who had like a synthesizer factory. It was called the Groovebox, MC303.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. So you could program your beats as well as melodies, and that's how I first learned how to make patterns and
what
to
age
combine.
were you?
Then I was around 16 or 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said that your dad was also really interested in, synth music and that whole movement. What did he do?
Oh, nothing with music.
Okay.
No, definitely not. Because he loved like Jean-Michel Jarre, but also like Hot Chocolate or Dire Straits. It didn't matter.
Sure.
But a lot of music he listened to was really like keyboard based and synthesizer based, and that was kind of like a new phenomena in the 80s, where you had this whole new analog synthesizer sound generated by electricity. Actually, the city I'm from, Eindhoven, Philips. They are like known for the lighting bulbs and stuff.
Right.
They actually invented the very first synthesizer using a lot of tape. It's really really cool actually.
I don't think I knew that. I should have known that.
Oh yeah. I think you can look it up actually.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing how they generated the sound, and that was like the very first synthesized melody.
Wow.
And it took a lot of manpower just to get that one melody. But
right.
it was the start, and it created this whole new phenomena.
Yeah, I mean it's such an interesting thing. We were talking about the differences between now and then, and that's part of it too, right? Is that nothing was easy about making music back then, right?
Like, absolutely no.
Making a simple beat, recording it,
recording as well. I mean, these days you have the sequence is like Logic, Cubase, Fruity Loops, Ableton. All these platforms where you can easily work with 80 or 100 tracks on top of each other to create your track. When we first started, it's like 12 tracks pretty much was the maximum.
Yeah.
And when I really started producing, I was already using the computer, so I had more capabilities to use multiple tracks to combine more sounds. But still, you were, always limited to the CPU activity of your computer, and it hit maximum quite quickly.
Yeah.
So you had to buy a better computer. But it already became a lot more easy to produce music when I started compared to the big studios with the big mixers. They already became a little bit obsolete at that point.
Sure. And this is something else I talk about a lot on this show, is that sometimes those constraints can be helpful, right?
Yeah.
Or they can spark creativity in a different way.
Absolutely.
Like I think about now when kind of we can do whatever we want. The computers are powerful enough, the tools are available for whatever idea you have, but
sometimes it's also too easy, because there's too much choice you have, and you kind of miss out the good sounds where you're skipping towards finding this one particular sound. And that's what it also is. When you're limited to certain tracks or certain sounds, you really dive really deep into the whole synthesis of a sound, in order to make it like super fat. And I think that's a big difference compared to these days. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and knowing your tools too, right?
Absolutely.
This is something else I've talked with a bunch of friends about, is that if you just focus on one tool, whether it's a DAW or a synthesizer, and if you know 100% of it, I mean, you could do anything with just one tool, right?
Yeah. I mean, these days as well, when the whole digital synthesis kind of became a new thing, the first plugins you used, they sounded really, really bad. But these days, the power is so big of a synthesizer that, for instance, with like a massive or a C-Length, you can create super fat synthesizer sounds, super fat sounds you wouldn't actually get from the old synthesizers.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting question, like the analog versus digital. Do you still use a lot of analog gear?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I was actually working on this track a few months ago, and I had a melody and I had a sound which I really felt like was sounding fat, but I knew I could make it better, using an analog synth. So I used the Dave Smith Evolver. and I created the same sounds, but with you have like the whole analog distortion on top of it, and all of a sudden the sound sounded so much more bigger and fatter, and so much more alive than I created it digitally. That still, analog has definitely more life to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think you're seeing now a lot of producers going back to the analog here, right?
Yeah, which is good. Definitely.
Yeah, I love it too, man.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's happening in all genres, I feel
Absolutely.
like right now.
And it looks good in the studio as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's fun.
It makes the studio.
If you're the kind of person, too, who, is hands-on, and it's sort of, at least for me, like it sparks something in a totally different way when you're actually, patching a cable.
Yeah, it's plugging into the Moog. Yeah, that's awesome, yeah.
It's fun, man. I mean, full disclosure, I barely use it anymore.
Yeah, and then you take all day to get this one sound and you're like, okay. There are better possibilities, but I'm very happy to get this sound, It took a whole day. Now I'm going to use it.
Well, and that's part of it too, right? Is like the feeling of accomplishment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like that's still worth something. And I think especially when you've been doing it a long time too, it's important that you still feel challenged in some way
Absolutely.
or another.
It's still, I feel with every single track I produce, I redevelop myself and I experience and I find out new things. And I love the combination as well as collaborating with other artists, especially with artists from a completely different genre. For instance, the track I did together with Frontliner, One Love, was kind of like a little bit of combination of my sound and his sound. And his sound originally is hardstyle.
Right.
But they have a completely different way of approaching a melody and a track, and he works with a lot of fast keys,
right?
And it was really, really cool to see, and very learnful to see as well how he works, but also what the pressure is of a hardstyle kick compared to, for instance, a house kick.
Right.
House kick has a lot more pressure at the very first attack of a kick, which makes the producing a track a completely different principle. It's pretty funny actually to compare it to each other. Yeah.
And did you end up learning anything from working with Frontliner that you ended up, taking with you and using down the road?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's he has his track The Melody Man, and that's because he's called The Melody Man. He's really, really good and sharp in making in a fast way really cool melodies, and it was really cool to see how he actually does that. He uses a lot of matrix schemes on top of each other, and he uses it as one big matrix scheme, and it's really cool to see how he does it.
Yeah, I love when you sort of just find the people who never really learned the right way, quote unquote.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
I learned completely the wrong way, which was actually for me the right way, because I couldn't read notes. So
you didn't play any instruments or anything?
No. I had to learn to play the keyboard myself.
Right.
But because I learned it myself, I never learned what was the logical way of producing a melody. And because I met this other producer who was on a conservatory.
Okay.
He was like a composer.
Sure.
And what is a dirigent?
Conductor.
Oh, conductor.
Oh,
Yeah, music conductor.
Yeah.
And he explained to me, it's like he got taught at school about a certain logical way of creating music. And he told me, it's like you use keys completely the wrong way, but it's not false or anything, but it creates this whole new kind of melody. And that, using the black keys and the white keys, completely the wrong way, can actually create something new. For instance, like the whole Nirvana era. The whole era was adjusting your guitar completely a different way, and that's how you come up with new stuff.
Did you ever feel the pressure? Did you ever think, "Oh, I need to learn music theory. I need,
No, definitely not about theory. No, I was also really driven when I decided I wanted to do this professionally. I started working with the first record company I was with, and they pretty much said no to every single track, and it made me stronger, because I really felt like I'm going to show you guys. I know I can do this, but I also heard myself that the tracks weren't ready yet. So instead of spending 8 hours in the studio, I was spending 14 hours in the studio, just like every single day,
Wow.
and just figuring out how how to make that one big track. I was looking for, and that's how it works, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's true. For you, when was that when you started thinking you wanted to do it professionally? If you started working with the tools when you were 15, 16, did you get serious pretty quickly about it?
Yeah. When I got the Groovebox, I already felt like this was something I wanted to do, in my life. But my family is quite a commercial family, so my dad, he kind of pushed me a little bit into doing a commercially education at the university. So I did.
Yeah.
But I was sitting at school only thinking about music. So at one point I did a combination, college and work. So I started working with my dad and my brother, and then I was sitting at the office. I was like, this is not me. This is not my thing. And at one point I decided that I wanted to do something professionally with making music. So I actually created a diversion with my parents. I said, I'm going to do two things. Either I'm going to go into the army, or we're going to become a music producer.
Man.
and they were completely against, the whole army thing. And so they said, no, you cannot go into the army. So, okay, well, then I go into the producing then.
You gave them
and
the
then all of a sudden it sounded a lot, better for them.
Better,
yeah. And I remember, the very first day when I became a producer, had my own company, being a producer. My dad came into my bedroom, and it was like 10 o'clock in the morning. And he said to me, okay, so now you're an entrepreneur yourself, and you think you can put the alarm clock at 10 o'clock in the morning. So, well, I'm not going to, produce music at 8 o'clock in the morning. So, this is my new time.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
And did you have any examples of successful producers or DJs that you were looking to as a model for success at that time? Because it was such a smaller scene back then, right?
Yeah, but still in Holland, the scene was already really, really big. Around that time, obviously, Chester was really breaking through, were exploding actually into the scene together with DJs like Marco V. Moby was really big in that day, and I was a big fan of Moby.
Yeah.
And Moby has always been a big inspiration to me.
You ended up remixing him, right?
Yeah. That was a big honor actually to do. Yeah, and basically I got inspired with the whole musical genre, not specifically one artist or another, but I just went out a lot and just listened to the music, and I was amazed because I loved listening to techno, but also loved listening to house, and then. The Marco V was playing at this club in Eindhoven. He was mixing house with trancey sounds, and this whole new sound originated from that tech trance. I was like blown away because I was missing something in techno, and he actually delivered that, combining techno, house, and trance, and I was blown away. And then I really knew this is what I want to do myself.
Sure, and I mean that kind of sound is sort of one of the sounds you got known for early on, right?
Yeah, and it still has been a pretty big thread throughout my career, as well. It's still today when I play a set, you can still hear those elements back.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Obviously you've had a long career, and you've managed to produce a lot of different styles of music in that. When you perform now, like say, take the performance you're about to go do tonight, what do you think people expect from you at this point, and sort of what do you want to give them?
Well, I mean that's actually the preparation you do as an artist. I've played before in Washington and at Soundcheck as well. So my preparation is actually thinking about what do people expect from me? What do I expect to play? What do I expect this party is going to be? Is it going to be a lot more based on a dance floor, or is it going to be more of a bottle service club?
Right.
It differs per club. The music you want to play. Also, it's all about the tracks you just produced and translate that to a set that fits the crowd
Sure.
you're playing in front, and it completely differs where you're playing, either in the US, East Coast, West Coast, or for instance in India or in China. It's a completely different scene, and still you want to keep your identity within that.
Right. And with you, I mean, I'm sure there's, you got to play the hits to a certain extent too, right? Like there's certain songs you're known for.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. I still, find myself in my sets, going back to the old tracks I produce, and there's a lot of old tracks I produce, and I still love playing out. Still, the track I produced with Oliver Helders, the WTF track, Coco, I still love playing out.
Yeah.
Also, the other track I produced with Oliver, the still track. It's kind of like a timeless kind of track.
Right.
So I would definitely play those tracks, especially at The Night Is Tonight, because it's the 15-year celebration of my radio show.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So tonight's going to be all about, reviving a few old classics combined with, some new stuff as well.
Man, that's so cool. And it's cool to hear you talk about too, that, you really do change the set depending on where in the world you are, who you're in front of.
Yeah.
Which I think is, that's like a DJ mentality, right? And I think that's something that maybe is lost a little bit in the modern era, because I have lots of friends who go and play the same set every night, regardless of where they are.
Yeah, well, that is a bit of an issue, actually.
Yeah,
because
and I'm not even really trying to like talk down about anyone, but it's just like I come from a DJ background too, and so I'm always trying to figure out who's in front of me, what's happening, and then to see the sort of newer breed just doing sort of more of like a rock show performance, right? Where there's a set list.
Yeah, you have your set list, and the problem with that is it's kind of hit or miss. It can work really well, or when the first few tracks doesn't work, and you keep on continuing to go into that path,
that's the danger.
It can go really, really wrong, as well. So to give a tip, it's always better to be a little bit more flexible with it. With that. Yeah,
yeah, I would completely agree, and that's the whole thing. I mean, some of those sets make more sense as a set list, right?
Yeah.
Especially when there's a big production behind it or something like that.
Oh, absolutely. It's a big difference as well playing in a club or at a festival.
Absolutely.
Whether you're gonna work with timecodes, which basically means certain tracks they send a signal to the VJ, so the VJ knows like, oh, this track is gonna play, so certain images gonna be behind you.
Right.
You kind of have to plan those shows because you want to focus not too much at just one particular moment. You want to spread it out a little bit, and so it becomes more of a story.
Yeah.
Then you have to prepare some more, with certain Purple Haze shows. I definitely need to, really sit down also with the VJ where we want to go. But, we're definitely with club shows. It's all about the freedom and flexibility and just, trying out. And that's also how you test out your new tracks. Because if you always plan your set up front, you start to get really, anxious about trying something else.
I think it's important to, like we were saying earlier, to keep yourself a little uncomfortable.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
not get too used to it.
Yeah, and sometimes completely mess up. That's the life thing, It's,
absolutely. There's a weird fear, I think, for people who are just starting off that, you can't mess up. It's the end of the world. But really, once you mess it up, and as long as you sort of pull it off and let people know that, you're just another guy.
There's two terms in this industry, basically meaning the same thing. In England, it's called galloping horses.
Yeah.
And I think, over here it's called shoes in the dryer.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, why not? Sometimes it happens, happens to the best.
Oh, it absolutely does, man.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Purple Haze project, which I definitely want to talk about. Well, I'm going to put a pin in that. We'll come back to it. But I want to talk a little bit more about when you were just first starting off and getting into it. And so, you'd sort of sold your parents on this plan now.
Yeah.
What were the first steps you took, after university, out of that, like to get yourself into the world more as a professional?
Well, I really felt like this was something serious. So, I needed to prove myself, towards myself and also my parents, because I made this big decision that meant getting out of college earlier, and also basically getting away from my family business. So I had to prove to them, as well as to myself, that I could do it.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time in remixing tracks, getting in contact with the record companies, show them, the diversity of my sound. They picked up pretty quickly, luckily enough. So they at Spinnin Records, they started working with me and asked me to do a lot of remixes, which for me was great because when you produce a track and the royalties, it takes a long time for them to generate.
Yeah.
So you don't actually earn any money the first 1.5 to 2 years. But then again, when you do a remix, you can just invoice a remix just on the spot.
Sure, you get a fee up front.
Yeah, you just get a buy off.
Yeah.
So I got around €750 per remix, which for me was great because I was doing a lot of remixes, and I
Could
made
you crank them out pretty quickly?
Really quickly actually. And with doing the remixes, the great thing about a remix is you already have the existing idea you can work on. Producing a completely new track is a completely different ballgame.
Yeah.
But we're doing a lot of remixes. You kind of get into the whole thing about creating your own sound as well. So I started producing my own music. Got my first record deals. I always turned down the advantage. So never in advance.
The advance, yeah.
Yeah, the advance, yeah. Because I always felt it kind of felt like a loan, and I hate loans. So that means doing more remixes just to get a living. But then after a few years, those tracks I actually produced on my own started to work as well. So producing is like building a catalog. So the track you produced 20 years ago is still working for you right now.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And then if you are able to make something a couple years down the road that a lot of people notice, then you have all of the stuff sitting behind you that they can go check out.
Yeah,
that's absolutely right.
Yeah, and for me, I really like a big turning point was I came across an acoustic solo of Message in a Bottle from Sting, from the Police, and it only contained his guitar and his vocal, and I was like, oh my God, I can completely build a track around this. So I made kind of like a techno kind of bass track, and that track got picked up by everybody from Chesto to Armin to all the techno DJs. Everybody was playing that track. So everywhere you would go, everywhere I would go, I would hear my own track. And for me, that was really that feeling of confidence. Like, okay, I know how to make a track. I can do this.
Sure. Once you see, all of the peers or the people you look up to are just sort of the figureheads playing it, that's definitely a big
That's
mark
a good sign.
That's a very good sign.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Spinnin, who I know you've worked a lot with over the years.
Yeah.
How did they even find out about you in the first place? How did you get in touch with them?
I was with my very first record company that was based in Eindhoven. One of the producers from Spinnin Records, he knew a guy there as well. So he came just to visit that guy, and he heard me messing about in one of the studios. So he came to my studio and he was like, "Okay, I really like the sound. I'm with Spinnin Records. You might send a CD to them because I really think they're gonna like your sound." So I did, and that's how I kind of got into Spinnin Records, and they first disapproved of all my tracks. And then I produced a track they actually liked, and then the whole remixing started.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously they're such a juggernaut now. Were they as big or a big name at that time?
No, they were really small. It was,
okay.
I think like 3 or 4 people. That was the whole company. And,
oh wow!
Yeah, it's like really boutique and really, really personal approach. And I have to say, even these days, they still maintain a personal approach, with whenever it comes to A&R and stuff. And, I owe them a lot because they really did so much more than they should have done as a record company, just feeding me with music, going to my studio every single day, just to develop myself as an artist. And, especially with Doorn and Roger, they put in a lot of work, for me throughout the years.
I mean, that's valuable, man. The importance of a good team is something I talk about a lot.
And yeah.
And you mentioned, you always would turn down the advance, all of that. Was that all you? Did you have management advising you? Or
No, that was just me.
Yeah.
I did my very first record deal was such a bad deal that I learned on the spot. Okay, they made a mistake on the contract about the expiration date of the contract.
Oh, okay,
that's how I got out of it.
Oh, that's lucky.
It was a royalty percentage of only 4%, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's very bad.
Yeah, that's really bad. I could have been signed for like 20 years with that contract.
Oh, man.
So I kind of learned myself, and if the record company would go to you, it's like, no, you have to consider us, as a bank, you loan some money and then you pay it back later. Or in this case, you make more tracks. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm going to produce the track and I'm going to release it with you guys and no advance. And in a year or two, I'll get my royalties for it.
I mean, I think you're not alone in having that first shitty record deal.
Oh, yeah.
That's a common story.
That's a good learning skill, definitely.
Right, exactly. I think that's, at least for me, that's how I've learned everything.
Oh, yeah.
Is, you get into a bad situation or you make a mistake the first time.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that sticks with me.
Yeah. And
people can tell me a million times, but,
Oh, yeah,
I have to learn
and I got away pretty good because I've spoken to, other colleagues throughout the years, and in some of the contracts the guys signed was really, really bad.
Oh, sure.
Like contracts where you had to produce 5 to 10 albums. That's impossible. That's not going to work. Never going to work.
Yeah, that's your whole life.
Yeah,
right
that's it. Yeah.
It's scary, man.
Yeah, it is pretty scary.
And it still happens today. I mean, I have
absolutely.
plenty of young friends who are in shitty contracts right now.
Yeah, they're so eager releasing that one track that they pretty much sign everything. But you really need to watch out with that because it can ruin your chances, in the future.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking about this too, when you're younger and just starting your career, it's so goal oriented, right?
Yeah.
You say, I want to sell this many records, or I want to play this festival, or I want to go on this tour. And then after a long enough time, it's more about sort of longevity and persistence, right?
Yeah.
And it's less about, I want this one thing instead of, I want to be doing this in 5 years, right?
You're going to realize it's so much more than just releasing a track or doing this one tour. There's so much that goes around it. For instance, doing your own radio show, nobody thinks about it when they start producing.
Right.
But it really enriches your career, and it's just such a great platform, to play out different music, to get people notice with you, as an artist. My identity radio show, I think now is broadcast in 70 countries in the world, which is great because every single week everybody, can listen to what I'm all about. Listen to the guys I've signed on Doorn Records. They do a guest mix, and it's phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's 15 years, you said, right? Which is, that's huge, which means you must have started that fairly early on.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. As like a monthly show. And it was like on DI.FM, digitally important FM was my first few radio shows, and then it became a bi-weekly show. Then it became a weekly show, and then it kind of blew up at one point.
And the weekly show is a grind, man. Like I do the weekly show on Sirius XM now, and I've only been doing that for about 2 years now. And I mean, it's a lot of work.
Oh, it's a lot of
way
work.
more than you think it's going to be.
Oh,
at the start.
definitely. You really need to plan it, and it's something. It needs to happen. It's
Right.
not like, yeah, you can't postpone it.
Yeah, no matter what you're doing, every week there's got to be a new one.
Which kind of sometimes can be a challenge because when you're really into a certain track when you're producing, you have to cut it out for like a while just to produce a radio show, which is fine. But you always, sometimes you have to break your moments, in the studio for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an interesting question too, because, you tour all the time, you do the radio show, you put out a lot of music as well.
Yeah,
you're still pretty prolific.
Yeah, and I produce, engineer, and master all the tracks myself as well. So.
Which is another thing I wanted to talk about because that's awesome, and I think that's pretty rare for someone who's at your level, and especially in the scene that you're in. Like I think the front to like the start to finish mix master everything is maybe more common in like the current like bass music world or the drum and bass or something like that. But for techno, trance, house, especially at the higher levels, a lot of people are not doing that.
No, well, basically no more free time.
Right. And yeah, that's not to say I'm not talking down about them either. But it's for you, it's interesting that you've sort of been able to maintain doing all of that.
I always found it very important, that every single track that has my name on it, it feels like my track. And it can only feel like my track when I produced it and I did everything about it myself. And, when I do collaboration, that's totally fine. But when I produce a track myself and it only says Son of a Doorn or Purple Haze, it only needs to be, a track I produced. And that's how I started to do this whole music thing, and that's the only way that's going to work for me.
How do you balance your time with all these different things you need to sort of keep going all the time? Like, do you stick to a schedule, or do you sort of more just like, well, this is what needs attention today?
Yeah, I've noticed throughout the years that I have really good producing moments. It's always May, October, November, and January. Yeah, that's always a really good month for me to produce music. So I always focus a lot of production time on those months.
Why do you think that is? That's so interesting.
I don't know why. It's usually throughout the summer season, you're so focused on the whole life side of things. They still produce, but on a lower level.
Yeah.
But then when you finish your whole summer season, you kind of unwind and you get like a lot of inspiration from playing out all these events.
Sure.
You take that back into the studio because I've noticed as well that it's usually better to stop producing for a while and then start again with a lot of inspiration compared to constantly trying to produce tracks, because you get into a sort of like a too easy flow and it's going to lose creativity then.
Yeah, that's interesting. And do you work on the road at all?
Yeah, just for small ideas, but I really need a studio to work it out. But sometimes you wake up with this crazy melody in your head, and I work it out on the laptop. And very very rarely I also produce a track on the laptop. But I prefer the studio.
Yeah. Well, that's understandable, and I think especially considering sort of how you started to learn, right? That's got to be what feels familiar, what feels comfortable.
Yeah. I don't like pressing, the K and the L,
right?
Just to make a melody on the laptop.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is so funny, man, because I feel like that's almost more common now,
Oh, it is, definitely. Yes. I mean, whenever I produce with a younger kid in the studio for a collaboration, they always come with the laptop, and I was like, with the headphones on, it's like, dingling. I just prefer the studio myself.
Yeah.
You're doing the radio show yourself now for 2 years.
Yeah. It's been cool, man. It keeps me listening to music, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Keeps me current.
Yeah. And you find, the whole radio phenomena over here in the US is changing a lot, Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I'm maybe not the best person to ask because, I've only been doing it on Sirius for a couple of years, but I mean, yeah, it's huge, man. It's amazing how big the audience is.
Yeah.
And that there's so much demand for it, you know.
Oh, absolutely, and as well as that the whole U.S. scene has grown so much and created its own style when it comes to bass or trap or dubstep and all these different genres. It's pretty remarkable.
Oh, it's insane, man. And that's something I actually wanted to talk to you about because, you know, you mentioned, we were talking about working on the road and you're touring and sort of going at a quick pace, different city every night. I'm curious, you know, the start of that, like we talked about when you were putting out all these remixes with Spinnin and then your own originals and, you know, things started picking up steam. When did people start booking you for shows? When did the travel start? Like, do you have memories of sort of those early days of touring?
Yeah, absolutely. The very first bookings request I got was pretty much after I did that the Message in a Bottle a bootleg actually originated from, and then it became an official track. And then I got an email from this promoter from Switzerland, Lausanne, which is kind of like the French part of Switzerland. Beautiful. It's like on the Lake of Geneva.
Oh man, I've been to Switzerland but never there.
Oh, it's the buildings over there. Yeah, you definitely need to go. It's like really classical, like this hotel room. And so, I was still playing with vinyl back in that day. And so I flew over there. I didn't know what to expect.
Had you DJ'd before?
Yeah, at the local pub when I was in college. That was my way of making money, playing for 6 hours and then cleaning the toilet afterwards. that was my learning school, how to DJ. So with those skills, I went to Switzerland. And that was the first time I was actually mixing my own tracks as vinyl. And I was really nervous. I remember the needle skipping at the first 2 tracks. And I was like, oh no, this is not happening to me. And then after that, quite quickly, I got a bookings request from London, from this club called Terminals. And the night that was played there was called The Gallery. And that's still going on these days, and I still play for that brand.
Oh, that's amazing.
In a different venue, but still work with those guys. Really, really cool. And then I made a big mistake. I'm bringing a headphone with a very small cord.
Oh, yeah.
So when I turn around to pick my vinyl, I actually pulled the whole mixer off. So the whole sound stopped. Everyone's like, oh. I was like, no.
It's like
Put
the worst
mixer
nightmare.
back, put the plugs in. Sorry.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, yay. And you know, it was a really remarkable night and a really crazy night. And that was also when I met my very first bookings agent, who was there as well. He was doing Marco V for the UK market, and he was Irish, and I didn't understand one word he was saying, but it just sounded really good. So I had more conversations with him, and he started doing my bookings, and that's how I first became working with a bookings agent.
And did you travel a lot in Europe before you started coming to the States or going to Asia or anywhere like that?
Yeah, actually, I didn't actually play in Holland. I started my career in the UK.
Okay.
And quite quickly went to the US after that. And after that, I was playing in Europe some more. I played in Holland, my own country, for the first time. But I first played in the US before I played in
that's
in
so
Holland.
interesting.
Yeah. And after that, I started playing in the south of America and also Asia. That came later, yeah.
What are your early memories of coming to America? What were those first few shows like?
Well, the very first one was in a club called 1015 over in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful. I love that club.
Yeah. And I went a day early. So the DJ who was playing there, the local DJ, was called Taj. He actually showed me around San Francisco. That was my very first acquaintance to the US, and I was blown away. We went to the hippie district,
right?
Pier 39, and that was my first acquaintance to the US, and yeah, and also music-wise, I really felt the connection pretty quickly over here.
What was going on? I mean, I guess you mentioned Moby, and there's plenty of other American acts who were doing well around that time. Was there anyone you connected with in the U.S. early on? Any other artists?
Well, definitely Moby.
Yeah.
And it was pretty special speaking to him actually in person a couple of times. He's a really original person. He's really spiritual. But I really got really inspired by him. What he was telling me, and it was pretty special actually meeting with him. For me, that was like a pinnacle artist to speak to in the US.
Can you remember any advice or something he said to you that really stuck with you?
Yeah, well, it wasn't so much advice. I was just asking him a few questions about how certain tracks originate. Because the first track I remembered from him was Go. Which was, he took from the theme song of Twin Peaks, which was my favorite series
I
in
love
the 80s.
Twin Peaks so much. Yeah, it's an incredible show.
Yeah, it was such a weird series that even the producer of the series didn't know how it was supposed to end. So everyone was like very vague about how the series was all about. But the music from Julie Cruz, who was kind of like the singer of all these tracks, and that just created such a big atmosphere for me in the studio as well. And Moby took that one track, that dark sound, and made it like into a house track, and that for me was really special. So we talked about that, and it was pretty cool. And actually, in the end, he signed a track on Doorn Records, which for me was pretty special. And then I actually got to remix one of his tracks. So
yeah, that's a full circle moment.
Full
right
circle,
there.
yeah.
And the record label as well, Doorn, you started that fairly quickly as well, right?
Yeah,
that's been running a super long time now.
It's a long time, yeah. A lot of releases, and the very first one was my track Riff, I decided I wanted to have an own record label as an extension of my own identity. But at first only to release my own tracks. But a lot of people started sending me tracks, and that really connected to my sound as well. So I started to do the whole A&R part of having a record label. And it kind of exploded in 2012 with a lot of tracks, and that was also around the time that I signed the Moby track, and also the Tsunami track from Dubs. And
that's huge.
Yeah.
Still to this day huge.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So it's a great platform, and it's so well combinable with the radio show as well.
Yeah, well, and so you mentioned earlier too, the radio show, the label. These are all ways that you can sort of engage with people who like what you do in different ways and build longevity for yourself. But it's interesting to me that you sort of latched onto those ideas fairly early on in your career, right? And I think earlier than a lot of people have. I'm just curious for you, like, have you always sort of had a vision for your career? Like, was there something about you or the way you think about your career that kind of led you early on to say, this is going to be an important thing for me?
Well, when I started, I actually only wanted to become a producer, and I never had the aspiration of becoming a big DJ or anything. I just wanted to produce music, and for me that was the full circle already. And then when DJing came about as well, with the first shows in Switzerland and London, I really started enjoying that part as well. But also that created a bit of a challenge, because how do you combine your time producing tracks with the time playing out tracks?
Right.
You're on the road or you're in the studio. So how are you gonna work that about? And then the radio show comes about. Then the record company label comes about. That's a lot of elements you need to combine. So it took a few years to get like the perfect modus with that.
Now you mentioned you have a family, and and you're still touring all the time. How have you managed to sort of balance out your time now versus, back then when it's kind of everything was new and exciting?
This is a completely new situation, actually. I have a kid.
Sure.
And I used to travel a lot with my wife as well. And so that kind of stopped at one point. It's a completely different life, and it's beautiful coming home. You have a smiling kid waiting for you, but it creates some challenges as well. My wife is also my manager, and she has a full-time job managing me.
Oh wow!
I have a full-time job doing all these things. So during the week, sometimes, it's about finding the balance there as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I always talk about the issue when what you love to do becomes your job, right?
Yeah.
And then you kind of can't tell where work ends and fun starts. And and that can be dangerous. But then you've got a whole nother level in that it's a family business now.
Yeah. It's quite tricky sometimes, but we talked about it, and I really strongly feel I want to do this for at least another 10 to 15 years. I don't know how long I'm gonna stay a DJ, but definitely the producing part I'm gonna continue. I want to produce film scores as well. That's always been a big goal for me as well.
That would be really interesting because that's a whole different way of thinking about making music.
Absolutely.
Right?
I love that. Something completely new, different. Yeah.
Which is maybe a good way to talk about the Purple Haze project that you mentioned earlier,
Which
right?
actually connects a lot to that as well. Actually, it's more storytelling way of producing music, and I already produced music as Purple Haze about 12 years ago, because I kind of felt like I needed an alter ego with a more darker and moody sound just for myself, because I really enjoyed making those kind of tracks in the studio. And I kind of stopped doing that for a couple of years, and a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago, I produced a track in the studio, which was supposed to be a Son of a Doorn track, but it really had that Purple Haze feel to it. And so I had to talk about it, with my wife, manager, and she said, I really see this is something you really, really love doing. So, produce some more tracks. And before I knew it, I produced this whole new album, which became Spectrum. And so we decided, let's try out if this was something we could do as live as well, doing a more storytelling kind of way of doing a mix combined with a VJ, with the whole visuals behind me as well. And it kind of blew up pretty quickly, actually.
And for you, it's not a new project, but sort of reviving the project after all these years.
Definitely not, but I would definitely say the sounds I'm producing right now is kind of like a new version of what I was doing back in those days.
Is that exciting for you to kind of have to, you're not starting over, but you sort of have to introduce people to a new thing.
Oh yeah.
It's not Sander Van Doorn, which is sort of this known quantity, right?
Yeah, it's something new, and it's something, a lot of people, they need to get acquainted with. So it kind of, makes you feel young at a certain, to a certain extent as well.
Are you able to sort of go back and look at how you built your career in the first place and use those lessons to kind of build a new project like this?
Yeah, absolutely. But the whole focus still is about, having fun with the project. And I actually turn down a lot of shows because I want to keep this very special. So I'm not doing that many shows with Purple Haze. Although right now I do feel like I want to do a lot of club shows with that as well. And I've been working with Dolby over the last 1.5 years. I already did a show in Chicago with my tracks completely new, mastered in 3D sound. And for me, that's a whole new way of producing.
Oh yeah,
and
like
mastering.
Mixing in surround sound.
Surround sound. Yeah. And so we're really on top of that right now. And I'm going to do a special show with that at Amsterdam Dance Event with Purple Haze. So that means for me, traveling a lot to London to go to the Dolby Studios to remaster my tracks, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's fun. And that's another way to keep it fresh for yourself, too,
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, so we've kind of talked about the evolution of your music over the years and even your life and sort of what you're doing. The one thing we didn't really talk about is sort of how the music and the scene and the trends have evolved with it, right?
Yeah.
Because from when you started until now, I mean, dance music is bigger now than it's ever been. The events are getting bigger, and what's popular in these trends, it's evolving faster and faster, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel any pressure to keep up with it? Do you has what's been happening in the scene, has it changed the way you operate? And sort of how do you see yourself fitting into what's going on now?
Well, over the 20 years I've been doing this now, a lot of things changed for me on a whole technical level, going from vinyl all the way to what we're doing these days. I use my USB sticks with the CDJs, so with the Dolby sets. I mix with the CDJs connected to laptop, which is completely different towards vinyl. So on a technical level, it went from the whole analog sound, which is great, but has a lot of restrictions when it comes to editing tracks and playing out your music on the spot. You just produce in a studio today. That's been a big difference, and also when it comes to genres and how that expanded and how new genres popped up. They came and went. Some other genres went really big. Other genres kind of stayed small. It diversified a lot over the last years. EDM exploded.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, as a sort of a counter reaction, deep house popped up, which was like really slow compared to really fast and hard. Hardstyle got really big. Trends in I would say around 2011, 2012, kind of diminished a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
And now it's definitely like growing again, because I would say these days music sometimes can become a little bit more impersonal, and I would say it has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of producers tend to produce tracks that, in their minds, is going to work at Spotify, where they're going to miss out the whole idea of you have to play those tracks out yourself as a DJ. So that's not gonna. It's hard to combine. So
it's like a little more pop leaning.
Yeah. And whenever it becomes pop, it becomes a little bit more impersonal. It becomes this ready formula, ready to listen to. I would say definitely the last 2 years, I've noticed that a lot of people are searching for more of the feel back into to the whole music scene. And I would say for me personally, that's where Purple Haze perfectly steps in. But it's been a crazy journey listening to all those different genres coming up and also getting it combinable with my own sound.
Yeah. And what keeps you here? What keeps you excited? What's still the most fun about this?
I'm still doing what I love most, and that's producing music and playing it out, and also I'm still learning every single day, and for me that's the most important thing. I still feel like I can put so much more into this whole scene over the coming years, and as long as I have that feeling, then why not do it?
No, that's perfect, man. Well, this has been really fun. I'll end by just asking the same question I ask at the end of each episode here. Just a simple question. You don't have to think about it too hard. Kind of the first thing that pops into your head. Just looking for a time in your life when, in a moment, music really deeply affected you. And that's meant to be a really broad question, and you can kind of interpret it as you want.
I would say it's a track, Sorted Affair from Workshop, the Mesoplex remix. Because I just got into my relationship, and for me that track really summarized the feeling I had about that relationship. So definitely that track.
That's a beautiful thing, man. When music, you can understand a feeling more through music, or the opposite, right? Where music gives you that feeling. That's the beauty of it, man. That's the magic.
Always, yeah.
Well, this has been great, man. Peace.
Cheers.
All right, that's the show. Shout out to Sander Van Doorn. Great to sit down with you, man. I really enjoyed that. Great hangs all around. I hope we get to do that again soon. And for everybody out there listening, I hope you had a blast as well. Don't forget to keep up with everything Sander Van Doorn is doing. His Identity radio show, Doorn Records, his Purple Haze project, his own personal touring. He's kind of everywhere all at once. And I'm going to put a link in the description of this episode where you can go keep up with all of that. You can keep up with me too. Email me at backtobackpod@gmail.com with any questions, concerns, comments you might have, or you can always hit me up at Willy Joy or at backtobackpod on all social media. That's it for this week. I hope you're feeling good out there. I hope you had some fun over the weekend. And no matter where you are for the next 7 days, try to take a little time for yourself. Carve something out where you can just go relax, do whatever it is that you feel like doing. Take care of yourself, take care of the people around you, and I will talk to you next week. For Back to Back, this is Willy Joy. Peace.